Ohio and Indiana Bar Associations require we give the addresses of the attorneys on the show, so here we go. There's all the information you need to know for Jay Vaughn. And of course, Don Moore and Dan Moore at Nimitz View Drive, moorelaw.com. And you can get all of this information by going to fox19.com and clicking on More Law. Now, we want to get right back to the phones. We want to get a couple more calls in here. We'll start with Wendy in Cincinnati. Wendy, this is question involves your husband, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
My husband was in a parked car, and the vehicle was hit, and he was cited for opening the door. Is that legal?
Did he open the door? I'm sorry, did he open the door into traffic, or why would he have been cited?
He was cited for opening the door into traffic, but he did not open the door. It was ajar, but he did not open it, and he did not try to exit the car.
So
broke down. He was sitting in the vehicle.
Okay, so listen, that sounds like a fact-driven issue. If you open the door in traffic, you're causing obstruction. Sure, that's illegal. You can get a ticket for that. Whether he actually did it or not is kind of like when they charge you with running a red light. The issue of whether you ran the red light or not is a question of fact. That's what you get. That's what happens in a trial, whether it's a trial before a judge or trial before a jury. Chances are, what your husband's been charged with is a minor misdemeanor, which means a $100 ticket. It's aggravating. I'm sure he didn't want it, but if he's not guilty, he should go ahead and defend it. And if they believe him, then he wins. If they don't believe him, then he loses.
Now, is that a situation where something like that, if it happened to me, do I just go to court by myself and just say, look, I didn't open the door, or it was caused by the accident, or do I need to call somebody?
Well, generally speaking, a $100 ticket, you can't afford a lawyer for that. It's just not enough. You just can't do it.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, unless sometimes if you get a traffic accident, you've got a points problem. In Ohio, you get more than 6 points, you start getting in trouble, you get 12, you lose your license. That's a big deal. So there are certain junctures where the points or a traffic ticket that looks minor on its face can have really serious ramifications. Then you need to get a lawyer. But if it's just basically you've got a clean record, it's a 2-point ticket. One of the things that is important is I would not plead guilty if there's been damage caused. Sometimes there's a difference between using your guilty plea as evidence in a civil trial versus a no contest plea. That may be worth a phone call to a lawyer. Okay. But that's something you just have to be careful of, but generally you're not going to get a lawyer for it.
Okay, good to know. Next up we have Cynthia in Dayton, and I know it's important to make the distinction, Dayton, Ohio. You were in a car and you rear-ended somebody, I understand?
No, I was by a name.
Cynthia, yeah. I am really sorry. I just don't have enough information, and we weren't able to hear you. But again, if you feel the need, give the show back a call, and we'll take your number and give you a call back. And let's go to Dan in Milford. Good morning, Dan.
Yes, ma'am. My daughter was in an accident about 2.5 years ago. The man was intoxicated. He was driving a company vehicle. This is his second offense. And, of course, he got sentenced to 6 years. But the company he worked for will not pay for any medical bills whatsoever. When I went downtown for a deposition after 8 hours, they want to know who called the air care because they thought that was out of hand, and they're not paying for it.
Okay. My goodness.
Wow. What a situation. Anything, what might you say to Dan?
I mean, it sounds like it's a case where there's already a lawsuit pending and you have legal counsel and attorneys are involved, but generally if someone is DUI in a work vehicle, there would be insurance coverage, commercial policy through that work vehicle, and you have to prove your case, prove the injuries, prove your medical bills, any lost wages, how it maybe has impacted your life, and then they have the opportunity through their own lawyer to defend the case and maybe say you weren't hurt as bad as you were, or you didn't need to miss as much work, or challenge the reasonable necessariness of the charges of the bills.
Okay. I think we just have a minute or two left in the show. So can we talk a little bit about, again, what should people do if they're involved in an accident? What do people need to know right away?
I think they need to know to call the authorities, check on people in their own car to make sure they're okay, get names, numbers, addresses of any witnesses, and if possible, safely, like Don talked about, preserve any evidence, whether it's skid marks, debris, damage of cars. I've had many cases where clients had a cell phone picture that helped prove damage, and the insurance company for the other driver who's at fault couldn't find photos, and it helped.
And that's one of the things, a lot of times, if you've got a relatively minor accident in the state of Ohio, you don't have to call a policeman. And if there's a bunch of traffic and there's no one hurt and liability is clear, that is, for instance, the rear ender, which we hear of so often, snap a couple of pictures, make sure see the other person's license, get all the information, and you can go. Just make sure it's by agreement. If there's any doubt about liability, they're denying something, you think you might be hurt, now you need to call a policeman for sure. If there's serious damage or any kind of injury, you need to call a policeman, but you don't always have to call a policeman. Jay, there's one other thing I wanted to ask you before you go. Quickly, how do personal injury lawyers who handle automobile accidents get paid?
We get paid on a percentage of the recovery called a contingency fee. So every consultations, meeting with me is free, meeting with an attorney that does a personal injury case is free. The fees standard is 1/3 of any recovery, and if we don't win or don't get recovery, the attorney gets 0.
Perfect, thank you.
Javon, thanks for joining us today.
Great to have
Thank you.
And we'll be
Enjoyed
back
it.
next week talking all about adoption. See you then.